A story of redemption after a failed reconciliation. Good day, everyone. I've been lurking for a few weeks and have responded to enough posts that I believe it's time for a proper introduction. My tale occurred over 30 years ago. I'm now 61, and this happened in my late 20s and early 30s. I married my college love at the time. What drew me to her was her image of herself as a strong and independent woman. The cherry on top was that she was also what you may call a Caribbean beauty. We married and moved to the east coast of the United States 4 days later to start new occupations, myself as an engineer and she as a scientist. I'd say the first 4 years of our marriage were, if not ideal, then certainly happier than the usual marriage. We spent a lot of time with one another since we didn't have any family or friends nearby, and we had some fantastic experiences together. Our problems began when we decided to buy a townhouse, and I assumed that the next natural step in our relationship would be to have a kid. To my astonishment, when I suggested this plan, it sent our relationship into a tailspin. After several discussions, my ex admitted that she didn't want to have children because she didn't want to have them with me. Ouch. She also said that having a kid with me would bind her entirely to me and that she was unsure if she wanted to spend the rest of her life with me. Things did not improve after these chats, and one day she came to me and told me that she was no longer attracted to me. I asked her if she was attracted to anybody else, and she replied yes, that she had a strong interest to her boss. Unbeknownst to me, she and her employer had formed a crush on one another. Her profession required her to travel almost 50% of the time, and he would join her on these excursions. They had already built a platonic friendship by the time she admitted her emotions for him, which quickly became on one of these visits. When I returned from this particular trip, I saw that something had changed. She was extremely remorseful and started to speak about selling our property and relocating to a smaller town where we could simply have a little house with a small garden and begin fresh and peaceful lives. Are you talking about? I thought to myself. You've been saying you don't love me, don't want to have children with me, and now you want to move in with me? She then proceeded to tell me a lengthy narrative about how her mother, who had been divorced and remarried, had gone a trip to Mexico when she was experiencing marital troubles with her first husband and had a 1-week tryst with a local guy. This should have sent off warning bells in my brain since it was nearly an admission that she had cheated on her employer on this most recent trip, but I was a lot younger and a lot denser in the skull, so I missed the obvious. Following this epiphany, she started working late, spending weekends by herself in the mountains, where later I learned her employer had a lodge, and even taking a 1-week trip by herself to clean her head. Remember, this was before cellular phones, so there was no way I could have reached her. I vividly remember how insane I felt spending a week without communicating with my wife and not knowing where she was. All kinds of ideas were running through my thoughts, save the most apparent: she is on a 1-week pleasure vacation with her sweetheart. Throughout this period, I supported her by paying for her IC, driving her to her appointments, and even waiting for her in the vehicle. I believe the IC persuaded her that she was being very unjust to me since she implied that the thought of divorce originated from him, not her. I was still hoping that with the appropriate amount of IC, I would be able to help her organize her thoughts and become the wife she had been shortly after our wedding. She was clearly in a state of anguish, as she alternated between saying she loved me and saying she couldn't take being in my company. I began to see that she would attempt to get into conflicts with me by giving me various reasons why she was unhappy, and she would keep fishing for a cause to make me angry. Once she struck in one, she would continue the assaults until I would just leave the home in search of calm and she could call her boyfriend, based on phone records. My life fell apart the day she requested for a divorce. I knew we were having problems, but I never imagined divorce in my wildest dreams. You must realize that I came from a highly Catholic, Hispanic family, and the concept of divorce was unthinkable to me. Around this time, I had to go for a 2-week training in another state. When I returned, she was gone, along with 1/2 of our furniture and 1/2 of our savings. I had no clue where she had disappeared to. I had no one to depend on back then. There was no internet, no Reddit, no online resources, and no online communities. I felt alone and abandoned. And I slipped into a profound despair. I had essentially let myself go for the past 18 months due to all of the turmoil and stress. I'd acquired a lot of weight and didn't give a about my health or looks. I genuinely think that we look the way we feel, and I looked like awful back then. My ex had left me with no return address and no means to reach her, the original NC, while telling all of our friends that it was all my fault, so I had also lost the few close friends I had. I was totally alone. Fortunately, I was able to drag myself to work every day and make enough money to keep the lenders at bay. After nearly a year of feeling like, I awoke one morning and noticed how the shadows slowly moved on the empty walls of my home's empty rooms, and it dawned on me, if I did not pull myself out of the hellhole of despair I was living in, I would soon become another shadow on the wall of an empty room. To give you a sense of how I felt at the time, I underwent open heart surgery 5 years ago. They sliced my chest open, shattered my sternum, and separated my ribs to have access to my internal. They wired my chest and sewn me up after redesigning my chest is still held together by 11 titanium wires. It took me 18 months to go back to a semi-normal routine. And do you know what else? I'd rather have another OHS than relive the pain of spousal betrayal and rejection. It was a brutal experience. By help, I was able to pull myself out of that pit of despair and begin to rebuild my life. I resolved to entirely reinvent myself. I had a decent career and a place to live. I started exercising and dropped 50 pounds, got a new wardrobe, got rid of my glasses, got eye contacts, started running and finally prepared for a marathon, started rock climbing, and started playing league volleyball. I started living a life I was proud of. I'm not the most handsome person, but I started to exude a sense of confidence that everyone noticed and ladies found appealing. Soon after, I started dating and realized that my wife's betrayal had been the finest thing that had ever happened to me, since it had enabled me to uncover the true me. After a few years of living this life, I started looking for another life mate, which I discovered in a colleague. We had been co-workers before my troubles began, and she had witnessed my decline and how I had slowly remade myself. She was the most beautiful lady I'd ever seen in my life. The guards in my building, with whom I was friends, couldn't believe it when I told them I was dating the babe of the building. We eventually married after falling in love. She left her work and opted to remain at home to raise our 4 children. This meant having a one-income family on the highly costly East Coast of the United States. It also meant that we couldn't live in luxury, but my wife turned out to be a terrific housekeeper and a better mother. While managing a family of 6, this lady completed triathlons and studied basic auto repair, woodworking, and general construction. There is no home improvement project she will not do, and we are now constructing a camper van so that we may journey throughout the United States when I retire in December. Our first grandchild will arrive this winter. I can honestly claim that my wife taught me what it is to be a strong and independent woman. Because of her, my life has been much enhanced. So, you see, no one knows what the future holds. All we have to do is get our act together and believe that there are nice people out there who are also looking for and prepared to share their lives with us. Betrayal should not define us, particularly if no reconciliation is conceivable, and even if our fails, it does not imply the end of our journey. You're probably wondering what happened to the ex. Well, a few years later, I learned that her employer divorced his wife within months after her desertion, and they moved in together and subsequently married. About 15 years ago, she contacted me out of the blue, I'm still not sure how she obtained my number, to inform me that a mutual acquaintance had died. We had a brief yet pleasant talk. When I asked her how she was doing, she said, she was living with the consequences of her immature decisions. That's all in the past, I said. I don't even think about it, she said before hanging up. I can honestly say that I am grateful to her since her choices brought my wife and me together. One more thing. Another result of my failed marriage and reconciliation is that for the last 15 years I've led a ministry at my parish. I'm a Catholic permanent deacon, for the divorced and separated, working with literally dozens of people struggling with their divorces to help them find some peace and look forward to their future with confidence. All because of my ex-refusal wives to reconcile with me. Edit, I've gotten a few queries, which I'll address in the epilogue to my narrative. Was she ever sorry? She never even said goodbye, as if the years we spent together, we met in college and were closest friends for a couple of years before we began dating, were nothing to her, and she never apologized. Did you ever speak with her? We had purchased a townhouse jointly, and she was contributing to the mortgage. To communicate, she devised a crazy system of phone calls via PAL so that I could reach her, and then she would contact me if she felt communication was required. She might contact me at any moment since I had not changed my phone number. We had just spoken a few times. Did you ever run into her again? I saw her 3 times between her desertion and our legal divorce, the last time on the day our divorce was finalized. This was a few years after she had abandoned me. She looked terrible, with no makeup and hippy-dippy attire. I, on the other hand, had shed 50 pounds and was working out hard at the gym at the time. In addition, due of how much weight I had dropped, all of my clothing were fitted, cheaper than purchasing new, so with the suit and tie I was wearing that day, I looked smart. The final look she gave me when the judge asked whether I had any objections to the divorce agreement will be with me forever, utter hate. I suppose her narcissistic mind couldn't fathom how much I had prospered in the absence of her harmful influence on my life.